The sun had not yet fully risen over Surulere when Adaeze Okonkwo tied her wrapper around her waist and began to stir the pot. It was 5:30 in the morning. The street outside was still half asleep. A dog barked somewhere near the junction. A kerosene seller rolled his cart slowly past the compound gate, and the smell of morning dew mixed with the smoke from a neighbor's firewood fire. Lagos was waking up, and Adaeze was already awake, already working, already giving. She was 44 years old, though most people who met her guessed younger. Not because life had been kind to her, it had not, but because Adaeze carried herself the way her mother had taught her, head up, back straight, wrapper pressed. Her mother, the late Mama Chidinma, used to say, "A woman who stoops under the weight of suffering will never see the blessings walking toward her." Adaeze had held those words like a lantern through 20 years of hard living. She was a pepper seller. Her stall sat at the edge of Adaeze Agansanya Street, beneath a rusted zinc canopy she had paid to repair 3 times in 5 years. She sold fresh tomatoes, tatash, otorodo, onions, and uziza leaves. It was not glamorous work. Some days the rain ruined her stock before she could sell it. Some days the market women undercut her prices until she was practically giving things away. Some days she came home with less than she had left with. But she came home. She always came home. She had 2 children, Chukwumeka, who was 19 and studying at Lagos State University, and little Kioma, who was 12 and already showing her mother's sharp intelligence. Their father, Adaeze's husband Nnamdi, had died 6 years earlier from a sudden illness that took him in 3 weeks. One day he was laughing at a football match on television. 3 weeks later, Adaeze was buying his burial cloth. She had not remarried, not because no one had asked. 2 men from the church had approached her, and one distant cousin of Nnamdi had made his intentions known, but because Adaeze had decided, quietly, that she would stand on her own 2 feet until God decided otherwise. She was not bitter. She was simply focused. Every morning, before she took her own breakfast, she cooked a second portion. A full plate, jollof rice when there was rice, eba and egusi when there was not, akara and ogi on Fridays when she visited the market early. She wrapped it carefully in a small pot with a lid and carried it 4 streets away to the corner of Bode Thomas Street, where an old man had been sitting for the past 3 months. His name, as far as anyone on the street knew, was Baba Rotimi. He was old, perhaps 70, perhaps older. He had a long gray beard, rough hands, and eyes that were brown and deep and unusually still for a man living on a street corner. He wore a tattered agbada that had once been white but had faded to the color of dry harmattan dust. Beside him always sat a small raffia bag and a walking stick carved from Iroko wood. He spoke little. When the area boys came to taunt him, he did not argue. When the rain came, he moved under the eave of a closed shop and waited. Nobody knew where he came from. A few of the older traders said he had appeared one morning in January, sitting like he had always been there. Some assumed he was a retired civil servant who had lost everything. Others, less kind, said he was probably a drunkard whose family had thrown him out. The young men who sold recharge cards nearby called him Baba Ghost because of how quietly he moved. Adaeze had noticed him on her 3rd day back at the market after the new year. She had walked past him once, twice. On the 3rd day, she stopped. "Baba," she said, "have you eaten today?" The old man looked up at her. His eyes were calm, measured, not the eyes of a man defeated, she thought, but the eyes of a man watching. He shook his head slowly. She had reached into her market bag and given him the small parcel of akara she had packed for her own lunch. He had accepted it with both hands, the way a man of good upbringing receives a gift, and said, "Dalu." "Thank you," in Igbo. She had blinked, surprised. He smiled just slightly and looked away. The next morning, she brought 2 portions. That was 3 months ago. And every single morning since, without fail, without announcement, without asking for praise or witnesses, Adaeze Okonkwo wrapped a warm plate and walked it to the corner of Bode Thomas Street. Her daughter Kioma had once asked, "Mama, why do you feed that old man every day? We are not rich." Adaeze had paused, stirring the pot. "We are not poor either," she said. "We have food this morning. He does not. That is reason enough." Kioma had thought about that for a long time. What neither Adaeze nor Kioma nor anyone on that street knew was this. 3 men in a black Toyota Land Cruiser with tinted windows had been parked at different points along Bode Thomas Street for the past 6 weeks. They worked in shifts. They wore plain clothes. And they had been given one instruction by their employer: watch and report everything. What they reported every evening was the same thing. The pepper seller woman came every morning. She brought food. She sat with the old man for 10 minutes, sometimes 15. She asked him how he slept. She told him small things about her day, her children, the market. She never asked for anything in return. She never looked around to see who was watching. She simply gave, and then she left, and then she went to her stall and sold her peppers and went home to her children. The man in the back seat of the Land Cruiser, the one who received these reports each evening through a phone call, listened in silence. After 6 weeks of the same report, he had said only 3 words to his head of security. She is real. If this story is already touching your heart, you are not alone. Hit that like button right now and subscribe so you never miss what happens next. Drop a comment below. Have you ever shown kindness to a stranger? Tell us your story. We read every single one. His real name was Emeka Okafor. Alhaji Emeka Chukwubuikem Okafor, 58 years old, born in Onitsha, raised partly in Lagos, educated in London, and for the past 30 years, one of the most quietly powerful men in West African business. He owned 3 hotels, one in Abuja, one in Port Harcourt, one in Accra. He had stakes in an oil servicing company in the Delta, a logistics firm that operated across 6 countries, and a real estate portfolio that included 2 entire floors of a building on Victoria Island. His personal fortune, if you believed the financial newspapers, sat somewhere north of 80 billion naira. He did not live extravagantly. That surprised people who found out about his wealth. He drove a modest car when he was not being driven. He wore simple native attire, plain kaftan, soft leather slippers, the kind of understated agbada that said dignity without shouting money. His Ikoyi home was large but not ostentatious. He employed 12 people on his household staff, and he knew every single one of them by name, by family situation, by whatever small struggle they were carrying. He was not married. He had been once, briefly, painfully, in his early 30s. His wife, Ngozi, had died in a car accident on the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway. She had been pregnant with their first child. He had never fully returned from that grief. People who knew him well said there was a door inside Emeka Okafor that had been closed for 25 years, and that no amount of wealth had ever found the right key. His mother, the late Mama Okafor, Lolo Adana, had been the compass of his life. She was a small woman from Ennui with enormous conviction, the kind of woman who could walk into a room and make every person feel they were the most important soul in it. She had built her own small trading business from nothing and sent Emeka to school on the profit from selling Ankara fabric and stockfish. When she became ill in her final year, Emeka had moved her into his Ikoyi home and sat beside her every evening after work. In her last week, she had taken his hand and said something that had stayed inside his chest like a stone ever since. Emeka, your money is large, but I do not know if your heart has stayed large with it. The world will show you good people and bad people, but the world will also show you people who are good only when they think someone important is watching. Find me someone who gives in the dark. Find that person and pour everything into them. That is how you honor me. She had died 4 days later. For 3 months, Emeka had turned those words over in his mind. His PA thought he was planning a new investment. His security chief thought he was grieving. In truth, he was designing something that had no name yet, a test, a search, a pilgrimage of sorts. He had decided to do it himself, not through intermediaries, not through charity foundations or community surveys. Himself. He would disguise himself as a man who had nothing, sit in a neighborhood where no one knew his face, and wait. He chose Surulere because it was neither the poorest part of Lagos nor the wealthiest. It was ordinary, working-class real. He chose a street corner with enough foot traffic to be seen, but not so busy that someone would move him along. He had a security detail at all times, 3 men rotating in shifts in 2 vehicles. But they stayed at distance, and they had orders never to intervene unless there was physical danger. He had done this for 30 days before Adaeze found him. In those 30 days, several people had given him things. A young boy had once dropped a 10 naira coin in his lap and run away laughing. A church woman had handed him a pamphlet and told him Jesus loved him. A restaurant owner 3 blocks away had, once, sent out a container of leftover rice through his assistant. But these were single gestures, offered once and not repeated. Adaeze was different. She came every day, rain or shine, market day or holiday. When the harmattan came and the mornings turned cold and dusty, she brought an extra piece of cloth and laid it across his lap without a word. When her stock had been rained on and she'd had a terrible day at the market, she still came. The portions were sometimes smaller on those days, he noticed, but she came. What broke something open inside him was not the food. It was the conversation. She talked to him the way his mother used to talk to people, as though their humanity was not in question, as though sitting on a street corner in a tattered agbada did not reduce a person to a category. She told him about Kioma's school grades with the pride of a woman who had sacrificed much for a small triumph. She told him about the market women who cheated on weights and the ones who were kind. She asked him, genuinely, whether his back was paining him, whether he had slept, whether the cold night had been hard. Once on a Thursday morning, she had looked at him carefully and said, "Baba, you don't talk much, but your eyes are like a man who has seen many things." She paused. "Whatever happened to you, God has not forgotten you. I want you to know that." He had looked at her for a long moment. Something behind his eyes had moved. He had nodded slowly and said, "Thank you, my daughter." She had smiled and gone to her stall. That evening, Emeka sat in the back of the Land Cruiser on the way back to Ikoyi and was quiet for 40 minutes. His security chief, Bode, watched him in the rearview mirror but said nothing. He had learned, in 12 years of working for this man, that some silences were important. When they reached the Ikoyi gate, Emeka finally spoke. "Bode," he said, "find out everything about the woman, quietly, respectfully. I want to know who she is, what she needs, and what her children's names are." Bode nodded. "Yes, sir." Emeka stepped out of the car and looked up at the night sky for a moment before going inside. "Mama," he thought, "I think I found her." The morning, everything changed, began like every other morning. Adaeze woke at 5, stoked the small gas burner, and put on a pot of oaf onigbu bitter leaf soup that she had been planning for 2 days. She added stockfish and a small piece of assorted meat that she had bought from the butcher on discount the day before. The smell filled the 2-bedroom flat in a way that made Kioma appear in the kitchen doorway still in her sleeping cloth, eyes half open, but nose fully alert. "Mama, that soup is serious," Kioma said. Adaeze laughed, a soft, full laugh that she saved for mornings when things felt, briefly, okay. "Go and wash your face. I am making Baba's plate first." Kioma did not complain. Over the months, she had accepted the old man on Bode Thomas Street as a silent fixture of their family rhythm, like morning prayers and the sound of the gate being locked at night. She had never met him, but she had heard enough about him from her mother that she felt she knew the shape of him. What Adaeze did not tell Kioma, what she had not told anyone, was that things were becoming difficult. The market had been slow for 6 weeks. The big supermarket that had opened 2 streets from Adaeze and Agansanya had lured away several of her loyal customers with their packaged, refrigerated tomatoes. Her rent was due in 3 weeks. Chukwumeka's school fees for the next semester were due in 5. She had gone over the numbers 3 nights ago while the children slept, sitting at the table with a pen and paper the way her mother had taught her to face problems, face to face, in the light, not in her head in the dark. The numbers were not good. She had prayed afterward, long and quietly, the way she prayed when she meant it, when it was not performance but actual conversation. She had asked God for direction, for provision, for the ability to keep her children on the path she had set them on. And then she had gone to sleep, because there was nothing more she could do at 2 in the morning, and the burner needed to be on by 5. She wrapped Baba's plate with care, a generous portion, because the soup was good, and she believed that good things should not be given in small amounts. She covered it with the lid and set off down the street. The morning air was clean. A woman was sweeping in front of her building. Two Okada riders argued lazily about a football match at the junction. Lagos was waking up in its unhurried way, and Adaeze walked through it the way she always did, purposefully, wrapped in her Ankara, head up. She turned onto Bode Thomas Street and stopped. Baba Rotami's corner was empty. Not just empty, clean. The small patch of ground where he always sat had been swept. The raffia bag was gone. The Iroko walking stick was gone. The folded piece of wrapper she had brought him 3 weeks ago against the cold was gone. There was no sign that anyone had sat there recently, except for a very faint impression in the dust where his mat used to rest. Adaeze stood very still for a moment. She looked up and down the street. She asked the recharge card boys had they seen him. The one called Soon shrugged and said, "Baba, since yesterday evening I never see AM. Maybe him don go." His tone was indifferent, the way people were indifferent to the comings and goings of those who had nothing to anchor them. She walked back slowly, holding the covered plate. She told herself he had probably moved on. People in his situation moved following small chances, following rumors of work or shelter or family. She told herself it was okay. She had fed him for 3 months, and that was something. She had spoken to him like a human being, and that mattered. She told herself not to be greedy about outcomes, that kindness was not an investment with expected returns. But she sat on the low wall near her compound gate for several minutes before going inside, and she prayed for him quietly, asking that wherever he had gone, something warm was waiting for him. Kioma found her there. "Mama, why are you sitting outside? Where's Baba's plate?" "He wasn't there today," Adaeze said. She kept her voice even. Kioma was quiet. Then she sat beside her mother on the wall. They sat together in the morning light and did not say much. After a while, Kioma reached over and took her mother's hand. That evening, as Adaeze was locking her stall and loading her unsold stock into the covered basin she walked home with, a young man approached her. He was well-dressed, not flashy, but clearly not from the street. Clean white kaftan, good leather shoes. He spoke Igbo and Yoruba without effort, the kind of man who had grown up between both worlds. "Good evening, Ma. Are you Adaeze Okonkwo, the pepper seller?" She looked at him carefully. "I am, who is asking." He bowed his head slightly, a respectful gesture, old-fashioned and genuine. "My name is Tunji. I work for a man you have been kind to. He would very much like to meet you if you are willing. He said to tell you the man with the Iroko walking stick sends his greetings." Adaeze felt the ground shift. She gripped the handle of her basin and looked at this young man for a long time. "Tell me," she said slowly, "who is this man?" Tunji smiled carefully. "That is what he would like to explain himself, Ma, in person. He is asking for 1 hour of your time. He will come to wherever you are comfortable. He will not waste your time, and he means you no harm." He said, and I am quoting him exactly, she gave without watching to see who was looking. "The least I can do is explain why I was looking." Adaeze stood very still. Behind her, the market was closing. Around her, the sounds of surrender in the evening, generators humming, children being called home, suya smoke drifting from a roadside grill, continued like nothing extraordinary was happening. But something extraordinary was happening. She could feel it in the way you feel a change in weather before the clouds come, deep in the chest, certain and quiet. "Tell him," she said at last, "he can come on Saturday morning. I will be at my stall by 8. Things are about to shift. Do not miss what happens when Adaeze and Emeka finally meet face to face. Subscribe now and hit the notification bell so you get the next chapter the moment it drops. And share this story. Someone in your life needs to hear that kindness is never wasted." Adaeze did not sleep well on Friday night. She had told no one about the encounter with Tunji except Chukwu Emeka, her son, whom she called on his university phone that evening. He was sensible, practical like his father, and she trusted his judgment in matters she was uncertain about. "Mama," he said after she finished telling him, "do you feel unsafe?" She thought about it. "No," she said honestly. "I do not feel unsafe. I feel surprised." "Then go," he said. "But stay at the stall where people can see you. Take Auntie Ngozi from the next stall into your confidence so someone knows where you are." It was good advice. She followed it. Saturday morning, she arrived at the stall at 7:30, which was earlier than usual. She swept the ground in front of it and arranged her tomatoes and peppers with care, something she always did but did today with extra attention, the way a person tidies their home before a guest arrives. She was not sure why this felt important. Perhaps because she wanted, if this strange thing was truly happening, for whoever came to see who she really was. Not a woman bracing for shock, a woman at her work. In her dignity. Auntie Ngozi, the smoked fish seller 2 stalls down, had listened to the story on Friday with wide eyes and was now stationed at her own stall with full alert capacity and strict instructions to observe everything. At 8 o'clock exactly, a black Toyota Land Cruiser turned into the street. It parked at a respectful distance. A driver stepped out first, then Tunji, the young man from Thursday. Then a third man, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a plain deep blue kaftan, no jewelry, no fuss, stepped out and looked down the street until he found her stall. He began to walk toward her. Adaeze watched him come and felt her mind doing a strange, rapid recalibration. Because even from a distance, even cleaned up and well-dressed, there was something about the way he held himself, the particular way his shoulders set and his head tilted slightly when he looked at something with attention, that was familiar to her. She knew those eyes before he was even close enough for her to see them clearly. Baba Rotimi. Not old, not broken, not 70. 50-something, perhaps, and clearly healthy. The stoop had been performance, the shuffle had been careful acting, but those brown, deep, watching eyes were exactly the same. He stood now at the edge of her stall, and for a long moment neither of them spoke. He was the one who broke the silence. Adaeze, he said. His voice was different now, fuller, no longer the careful murmur of a man trying not to be heard. It was the voice of a man who was used to being listened to. My real name is Emeka Okafor, and I owe you a full explanation. She had braced for this moment. She had rehearsed a composed response. But when she heard her own name in that voice, his real voice, coming from the face she had fed every morning for 3 months, she felt something loosen in her chest that she had not known was tight. Sit down, she said. Her voice was steady. She gestured to the low stool she kept for customers who lingered. He looked at the stool, and something flickered across his face that might have been amusement or might have been humility. He sat. And then he told her. He told her about his mother's last words. He told her about the 30 days before she found him, when no one had done what she did. He told her about the 6 weeks his team had watched her, and what they had reported each evening, and what he had felt each time he heard the same thing. He told her about Ngozi, his late wife, and how grief had made him cautious about people for 20 years. He spoke without performance, without the smooth, rehearsed confidence of a business meeting. He spoke like a man who had practiced being honest and found it difficult and was doing it anyway. Adaeze listened to all of it. When he finished, she was quiet for a time. She adjusted the cloth over her tomatoes. She looked at the street, then she looked back at him. I want to ask you one thing, she said. Anything. When I sat beside you on those mornings, and I talked about my children, my market, my small troubles, were you recording? Were you studying me like a specimen? It was a direct question. She asked it without anger, but without softness either, the way her mother had taught her to ask the questions that mattered. He held her gaze. In the beginning, he said, I was observing. By the 3rd week, I was just listening, the way you listen to someone whose company you have come to value. He paused. There is a difference. I know you know that difference. She looked at him for a long time. Yes, she said finally, I know that difference. He reached into the breast pocket of his kaftan and placed a folded document on her stand between the tomatoes and the pile of tatash. I am not here to hand you money on a street corner, he said. That is not what this is. My lawyers have drawn up a business proposal, a proper one. I want to fund a full market supply business in your name. Warehouse, delivery vehicle, wholesale contracts with 3 supermarkets I have relationships with. It will be yours, fully registered in your name. I will be a silent investor for 2 years, and then I exit. Your business, your profit. Adaeze stared at the document. My son Chukwuemeka's school fees. she began, almost involuntarily. Covered, he said quietly. Already arranged through the university bursary, if you accept, and your daughter Kioma's secondary school fees through graduation. He folded his hands. I know this is large. I am not asking you to decide today. Take the document. Consult your son. Consult whoever you trust. I will wait. He stood up from the small stool, straightened his caftan. There is one more thing, he said. My mother, before she died, said to find one person who gives in the dark. She did not tell me what to do after I found them. He smiled, a real smile, the first she had seen on that face without the disguise of weariness. I think she trusted me to figure that out. He left. The Land Cruiser pulled away. Auntie Ngozi appeared at Adaeze's shoulder within 30 seconds. Who was that? She demanded. Adaeze picked up the folded document and held it carefully with both hands. That, she said, was an answered prayer. 3 months after the Saturday meeting, a small but serious ceremony took place at a rented hall on Adaeze Agansanya Street, 4 blocks from Adaeze's market stall. It was not a grand occasion. There were perhaps 60 people, traders from the market, 2 of Adaeze's church women, Chukwuemeka in a pressed agbada that made him look exactly like his late father, and 12-year-old Kioma in an Ankara dress she had chosen herself. Emeka came with Tunji and Biodun, his security chief, and no other entourage. There were white plastic chairs, a modest spread of puff-puff and small chops, a keg of cold zobo, and a banner printed at a shop near the University of Lagos that read, CHIDNMA PROVSONS and Supply Co. Grand opening. Adaeze had named the business after her mother. In the 3 months between the Saturday meeting and this morning, she had moved carefully and deliberately. She had taken the document home. She had read it twice, slowly, with a dictionary nearby for the legal words she did not know. She had called Chukwuemeka to come home for a weekend. They had sat at the table, just the 2 of them after Kioma slept, and gone through it line by line, the same way she had once taught him to go through his examination papers, starting from the beginning, marking what he did not understand, going back. The terms were clean. Emeka's lawyers had been thorough and honest, or so the young solicitor Adaeze had hired from a firm in Ikja confirmed after a week of review. Full ownership in Adaeze's name. Emeka held no operational control. His investment would convert to a loan with low interest after 24 months, repayable over 5 years from business profit. If the business did not grow to the point of profitability in 2 years, the loan was forgiven. There was no catch she or her solicitor could find. Mama, Chukwuemeka said that night, this is a real opportunity, but it is your life. Only you can say yes. She had thought of her mother. She had thought of the morning she had first sat beside the old man on the corner and thought, what if no one is kind to this person today? She had thought of Nnamdi, her husband, who used to say that fear and caution were not the same thing, and that only one of them was wise. She had said yes. The warehouse was small, 2 rooms in a compound off Western Avenue, leased for 2 years with renewal option. The delivery van was a used Mitsubishi Canter with a new engine, painted white with CHIDINMA PROVISIONS written in green and orange. She had 3 wholesale contracts, one with a mid-sized supermarket in Surulere, one in Jibagada, one in Yaba, for fresh produce supply 3 times a week. She had hired 2 people, a young man named Femi, who had been carrying loads at the market for years and knew every produce contact in Lagos, and a woman named Mrs. Bassi, who had retired from a bank and offered to handle her books part-time for a fee that was fair to both of them. At the opening ceremony, an elder from her church prayed over the business in a voice that filled the hall. The market women she had known for years came and dashed her with small amounts of money folded in their hands. An old tradition, money pressed into the palm of someone beginning something new, saying, we believe in you, we are with you. She cried. She had not planned to, but she did, standing at the front of the hall with Kioma pressed against her side and Chukwuemeka's hand on her shoulder. She wept with the particular full-body relief of someone who has held things together through gritted teeth for a very long time and has finally, briefly, permission to let go. Emeka sat in the 3rd row and watched. He did not speak at the ceremony. He had asked Adaeze if she wanted him to say something, and she had said, gently but clearly, "This day is about my mother's name and my children's future. You are a guest, a welcome one." He had nodded and accepted this without injury, which told her something about who he was when the power in a room did not belong to him. After the prayers and the food and the small speeches, when the guests had thinned, and Kioma was being bounced between the market women who all considered themselves her aunties, Adaeze found Emeka standing near the door with a glass of zobo, watching the room. She stood beside him. "How does it feel?" he asked. "Like the beginning of something," she said. "Not the end of hard work, just the beginning of a different kind." He nodded. "That is exactly right." He was quiet for a moment. "My mother would have liked you." "Tell me about her," Adaeze said. So he did. Standing near the door of a rented hall in Surulere while the market women cleaned up and children ran between the chairs, Emeka Okafor talked about his mother, about the Ankara fabric and the stockfish, about the room in Ennui where she had built her business from nothing, about the way she could make every person feel seen. He talked about Ngozi, too, briefly, carefully, the way you mention a wound that has healed but left a mark. Adaeze listened the way she had always listened to him, fully, without checking the time, without making it about herself. When he was done, she said, "You have been carrying a lot of people's memories alone for a long time, Emeka." He looked at her. Something in those brown, deep eyes shifted, the same shift she had first noticed on a Thursday morning on Bode Thomas Street when she had told him God had not forgotten him. "Yes," he said quietly, "I have." "You don't have to," she said, simply, without agenda, the way her mother would have said it. Outside the hall, Lagos went on being Lagos, horns and generators, and the smell of suya and someone's praise music from a nearby speaker. Inside, 60 chairs still held the warmth of the people who had sat in them, and the banner with her mother's name hung straight on the wall. Adaeze Okonkwo had started with a warm plate and a street corner, and the stubborn belief that kindness is never wasted. She had been right. This story was about more than a billionaire's secret. It was about what a good heart builds over time. If this story moved you, please share it with someone you love. Hit like, leave a comment, and subscribe so you never miss another story on this channel. And remember, the next person you show kindness to, you have no idea what God is doing on the other side of that moment. We will see you in the next story.